This is your chance. So, hello, everybody, and welcome to the first day of Coding Bootcamp here at Hired Labs. My name is Jeff Stock. I'm co-founder, CEO at Hired Labs. And generally what we're doing with our entire project is we're working on battling underemployment amongst veterans, specifically enlisted veterans. We found that enlisted folks have a harder time transitioning out of the military and finding meaningful work when they get out and maximizing their skills. So we do a number of things. One of the things we do is a coding boot camp, which you are all here for today. Before we dive too deep into things, I wanted to go around and quickly give you all a chance to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit by why you're here. We're all veterans here. It's a kind of a small group this time, so we definitely got plenty of time. I would love it if you turn on your camera, but not required if you're not comfortable with that. But with that, maybe just quickly branch of service. I guess I kind of go first. I was 9 years in the Marine Corps. I was a Russian linguist and interpreter for a long time. Got out 2010, and yeah, now I'm doing this. So, who wants to jump in? Maybe name where you are now. I'm also California, outside San Francisco. Branch of service, and kind of what brings you here, what you're looking forward to. We want to jump in? I can call somebody.
I'll go. I'll take it. My name's Austin. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I'm out here in the Bay Area. I guess if you count Concord as the Bay Area. I'm currently a case manager for veterans, just looking to, boost my resume with this skill.
Excellent. Excellent. Welcome.
I go next.
All right.
I'm a veteran. I'm out here in the Bay Area by way of Alameda. I was currently a game developer at Sledgehammer Games, and I got caught up in the whole layoffs. It kind of ran down to the gaming industry. But I'm trying to like diverse my portfolio to learn a little coding so I can provide a little bit more talent to the gaming industry.
Okay, cool. Cool.
Shadiqua Smith. I am in Oakland, and I was in the Air Force, and I worked in surgery. I was a scrub tech, and I currently work for the probation department as essentially a program manager. And I am looking forward to learning the basic of the basic because I don't know anything about this.
Excellent. Excellent. That's what we'll do. We're going to start it from the basics of the basics.
Hell yeah. My name's Corey. Sorry, I'm trying to configure this on the camera while also eating. So my apologies for not being on with the camera. But my name's Corey. I'm over here in Walnut Creek from the Bay Area. I was in the Army for about 8 years, give or take. And I'm just really excited to be here. Super excited for the opportunity to learn this coding. This new to me as well. The space that I'm in is talent acquisition. I'm a tech recruiter, and I definitely want to venture away from that space and go into engineering. So I'm also in school to try to learn that as well. So, just super excited to be here. Pleasure to meet you guys.
Nice. Nice. Welcome, Corey.
My name is James Maddox, and I am here in San Francisco. I was in the Marine Corps, and I am I'm in this course to like learn the basics as well and just learn. That's all.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully we'll learn something.
Yes.
Glad to have you, James. Right on. All right. Someone else who hasn't introduced themselves, branch of service.
Hi, my name is Youngster. You can just call me Alex if you want. I'm also a veteran from U.S. Army. I did 4 years active. Right now, I live in San Francisco. I go to school. I have a little bit of background in Python, so I just want to learn something out of this class.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Hope we can get you something valuable. Good to have you. All right. Anyone else on the call? Shanshan or Young, want to jump in and introduce yourselves?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. Yeah, my name is Shanshan, and I'm interested to learn some coding stuff. Hopefully, I can be more like get more knowledge for the technique, coding technique.
Okay. Okay. What branch of service are you in, Shanshan?
Oh, I'm interested in the Python. I heard before it's very convenient, can do the like a analyze a day, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. I'll follow up with you a little bit later on that. Appreciate it, Shanshan. All right,
Mhm.
anybody else? No? All right. Great. Well, then let's just dive in. So we are in our first day. Welcome to boot camp. We're in week 1. We'll do foundation this week. We're going to go pretty fast. This is going to be a pretty fast course. Today we're going to cover introduction, and at the end of the day, we're going to set up on our development environment and the main piece we're going to work on. So this is the agenda. We're going to do a course overview, talk about logistics, tell a little bit about the concept of the course, what we're going to go over specifically, who I am as the instructor, all that sort of stuff. And then we're going to take a quick break. This is the only time that we have a break scheduled in the class. And I'm going to send out some free resources that we've compiled to help you learn. They're great. They're really all you need. Maybe just a little bit of motivation here in 10, 15 minutes and that list of resources. And honestly, that's it. You can be off to the races and learn from there. But hopefully you come back. The break is also give you a chance to slide out. If this isn't the course for you, decide after the overview and all those sorts of things. Maybe this isn't where you want to be. Gives you kind of a graceful moment to exit. And then we're going to dive right back into it when we go to the introduction to programming. And the content we're normally going to have in the course is generally structured this way. So we're going to do introduction to programming languages, Linux CLI, which stands for Command Line Interface and File System Basics. And then we're going to go through the Python Anywhere site that we're going to use to do all these things. And generally, that's kind of how we're going to go. Every day, we're going to show up, do some quick, high-level, theoretical kind of stuff, explain some concepts, and then we'll get hands-on and start writing stuff. So today, at the end of the course, we're going to be writing commands. We're going to be doing some stuff in the Python Anywhere environment. If you haven't set it up yet, that's okay. We'll have time again on the break to go and do that real quick. And during those few slides after the break. And then once we get going on it, we will, I recommend you slide this presentation, this video, the Zoom call over to one half of your screen and have that open on the other half and type along with us while we're doing everything. It's the best way to do it, but we'll get into the specifics of that as we go. So course overview. Start out with, I have nothing to teach you. So I took this little line, I got you all excited here, and now I'm gonna start off with saying I got nothing for you. So that's it. Everybody go home. No, the point here is that I took this sort of from some stories that I like in Buddhism. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not trying to sell that philosophy or pitch you on the idea, but generally speaking, in the stories, some student comes up to a master. I'm not trying to position myself as a master, but the master says, I got nothing for you. And ultimately the lesson is that they had the lesson the entire time. That's how to discover it themselves. That's kind of what the concept is here, that the information we're presenting is not ours. It's out there. It's free. It's available. What I really want to do is inspire you all to get that discipline, to do a little bit of it every day, find the resources that are out there that are free, and dig in there and really learn, because that's how it's going to happen. What we're going to do specifically in this course, though, is we're going to do the same things that Coding Bootcamp does, in the sense that we have a progression of concepts from simple to more complex. They'll all be beginner level, but they are, tying together off of each other and building towards something at the end. We'll have hands-on practice all the way through. And we have a tangible objective. We're going to build a fully functioning web app from scratch directly in the Python Anywhere instance that I've mentioned already. We're going to build it directly there. It's going to be live on the internet that you can share with people and show people and modify however you like. Intangibly, we also have some objectives. We want to demystify coding for everybody. I know some of you said you have varying degrees of exposure to coding already. Some people have absolutely none and you're completely new. That's totally fine. What we really want you to get out of this course is to be able to know that you can go and do these things to the extent that you want to understand where to find the information, how to use it, and find ways to apply it to whatever goal you have for yourself, whether it's to become a developer specifically, just use some of this in the job that you have, understand it better, whatever your goal might be. You want to make sure that it's not something that seems out of reach for you. I want to give you, quote unquote, the tools to build anything, right? So once you understand how to do these things at a fairly basic level, you realize that all the tools are out there and they're free, and you could build just amazing amounts of stuff if you just know how to plug it in and kind of where to look. So we're going to get you started down that road and show you some basics and again, a framework that you can apply to other things. And the other thing is to build a community of veteran coders. So all of you should be military veterans. We screened before you came in here. And we want you to join our Discord servers, stay on our email lists, and connect with other folks like yourself who are learning to code, who have some experience with it, and are going along this journey. Because it's going to take a lot longer than the 6 weeks that we have together to really do anything substantial. And anything of substance that's built takes more than one person to do it, right? So whether you're working on projects now or maybe joining somebody else's project, we want you to stay in touch with each other, including us, and along your journey. So why learn to code? I know some people have kind of alluded to this already. Maybe you mentioned it in the pre-course survey and why you want to take this. Generally, we're all aware that's a highly paid, in-demand skill. But I want to make sure to highlight that that's not just for developers, right? So I've never sat the seat of a developer, but I made pretty good money off of knowing how to do these things. I've applied code directly to positions that I've had in the past, and as an independent contractor, and I've gotten paid pretty well to know how to do these things, even though I've never been a developer, right? So maybe a similar case for you. This may be something you want to take and go be a full-on developer. Absolutely tons of money in that. Really anything can be built though, once you know the basics. Again, once you understand how these things get plugged in, where you can find information for it, and how to run this sort of stuff, the sky's really the limit. You can write, we're going to be doing a web application, but the same principles that we use here can be applied to desktop, can be applied to mobile, can be applied pretty much anywhere. And there are tons of things that are applicable broadly outside of the scope of this course that we're going to expose you to in the course of this. All right, so with that, the requirements. This is a full list of everything that you're going to need to be able to learn how to code and be successful in this course. All right, so first thing, you got to be able to read and write. Read is highlighted because that is the most important thing. You're going to be doing way more reading than writing anytime you code. The writing is kind of the last thing you're doing. You're going to spend a lot of time reading your own code, reading other people's code, reading documentation, examples, all that kind of stuff. So reading is really important. You do have to be able to write, but it's not going to be anything complicated, right? So if you could read and write emails, which I'm sure all of you can, that's it. That's really the level you need to. We don't need to be novelists or journalists or anything crazy like that. You got to want to do it. So desire, that's the second thing that you need outside of the ability to read and write. So think about real boot camp. When you went to that, if you didn't have the desire to pick up your feet and run when they told you to run, you weren't going to go anywhere. If you didn't push the ground away from yourself and, do the push-ups, it never would have happened, right? So no matter how much they yelled, it took your desire to get it done. So third thing we need, unlike real boot camp, is an internet connection. This is a lot of stuff that we're going to do actually everything we're going to do is going to be online in, I mentioned it before, Python Anywhere. It's a Linux instance. We'll get into the details of what that is, that we're going to use to build our web application from the ground up. Now, the reason we do it in Python Anywhere is, well, there's a couple of reasons. One of the cool ones is it doesn't matter what device you're on. If you're on a Windows machine, or if you're on a Mac, it makes no difference because it's web-based. So it's in the cloud. You can just work on it there, and it's all the same thing. We can collaborate. You can set me as your instructor, which we'll go through later, so I can see what files you have and help you out if you get stuck. That's really nice. But it's also good for people who may not have their own device. So a lot of this is, since we are targeting veterans, a lot of our community is in transition out of places like prison or in homeless situations, and they may not have their own device, but they can get into a community place with an internet connection. So I want to make sure that not having your own physical device is not an obstacle to learning to code. This stuff is out there and available if you have. The last thing, just a little bit of discipline to do this regularly. Ideally every day, just a few minutes. Do like 10, 15 minutes. One of the things that we're going to send out in the free coding resources is this thing called Free Code Camp. It's awesome. They have really good classes broken down in bite-sized increments. So you can just do a few of those a day. You'll get really good really quickly, but it takes some regularity, some practice to it. So you notice another thing that's not on here besides your own physical device is math. You do not need to be a math whiz to do coding. We're not going to do any math in this class. We're going to have a very, very small amount of it today, but that's about it for the entire course. And it's not like I'm going to expect you to do any math. It's kind of, there will be numbers, but you don't need math to be able to code, right? All right, course cost. Here we go. This will cost you absolutely nothing. There is zero cost. We will not ask you for any money. None of the tools that we use cost any money. They may pitch you on some sort of, up-level service or something like that. You don't need it. We don't endorse it. You're not going to need any of those beyond the free tier for anything that we do. It will cost you your time and effort. Again, you need to participate. Ideally, show up to classes if you can. Be a part of things. Ask questions. Do the exercises. Do the work. and it'll pay off for you. And then for us as an organization, we thrive on your feedback, right? So if you decide that this isn't for you, let me know why. Just say, hey, this, not my level. Turns out I don't like it. I don't like you. Your haircut's terrible. Whatever the case may be, just give us the feedback. It's all valuable for us, and we'll take it and hopefully improve future iterations of the course and make it more valuable for people. But that's it. So we just ask for your time and effort, a little bit of feedback from you. How are we generally going to do this? All right, so we're going to treat it like a real boot camp. The fastest it's going to be very fast. It's going to be very fast paced. So if you're running behind, you feel like you're not catching up, raise your hand. Let me know. I can slow down. I can spend extra time with you. But the idea here is basic training, right? So we're not going to get any super depth on anything. We're going to skip across a lot of really deep concepts, but we're just going to get just the high level of them, and we're going to move on. And the idea is at the end of this, just like real boot camp, where you became a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine, or coastie, I guess, whatever. I don't know what they call them when they get done with boot camp, but whenever you get finished with your boot camp, you had to go and do some further on training in whatever your specialty was going to be, right? Same kind of way here. You do some basic stuff. You understand where things go, how they work, how you plug them together, and then dive into some other particular aspect of coding that you want to do more of, right? So we're going to do 6 weeks of instruction. We're going to have hands-on practice every day in class. Some classes going to be, the majority of it will be writing stuff and doing things hand-on. But it is self-paced, right? So there's milestones along the way that we want to get to, certain functions we want to get to, places in the web app that we want to have reached. But if you can't keep up because it's too fast, that's fine. You can go at your pace, do it slower. If you want to go faster, we have recordings from previous sessions. We have all the documentation written down from the app. If you want to go faster than this, and you want to get it done sooner, that's totally fine as well. Just, let me know. I can send you the documentation, and the recordings are actually up on YouTube. So you just find those whenever you want to. But the main thing is to practice. Ask questions when you get stuck. Work together with each other. Ask each other questions. And then stay in touch through Discord. I'm going to send out the server invite with the free resources when I send here at the break. All right, general syllabus and what we're going to do, kind of break down week by week. So this is week 1, we're in programming foundations, where we're going to cover, again, the very basics of computing, some low-level command line interface stuff today. Then we'll do the syntax of Python a little bit next time on Thursday. And we'll be writing simple programs on Thursday that we can run straight from the command line. And then in week 2, we're going to talk a little bit about algorithms and data structures. This is, again, a place where math might come up, but we will not have any in this class. It's just kind of a place where if you're trying to get into AI or machine learning, or if you want to be a professional developer, efficient algorithms, proper data structures and those sorts of things become really important. And this is the place where math becomes important. Again, not for this course, just kind of generally speaking. Then after that, we start actually building our web application for the next few weeks. We start in week 3. We're going to lay down the foundation. Then we start doing a little bit of the front end design and development. We start talking about the things that users interact with on the website. That sort of thing is the front end. Then week 5, we go to the back end development and design, where we do database interactions and some of the more functional things with creating, reading, updating, and deleting. Those 4 things we'll say over and over again as operations of all applications you know of do those things. So we're going to do those as well in our to-do list application, is the application we're going to build. Then week 6, we're going to wrap up the app, and then we'll go on to advanced topics, things like collaborative coding and using Git as a technology, and things, websites like GitHub on top of that for collaborative coding, and moving on from there. So any general questions on what we've gone through up to now? Course structure, syllabus, any of those sorts of things? Nope.
Will there be any certification at the end of this course, or is just learning the basics?
No, that's a great question. So I personally don't like certifications. I'm a kind of an opponent of those sorts of things. So we don't issue a special certification. If you build the app, you'll have a fully functioning app. You can make it look like a certification. Make it however you want. So that's really what the certification is, man. But right now we don't. If we decide to in the future, anybody that finishes, I'll send you one. But I've had a couple people on my side say that we should. But if you've never read it, there's this great speech that was given by Smedley Butler, the most highly decorated Marine. Any Marines on the call probably know the name. It's called War is a Racket. I definitely recommend checking it out. Real quick PDF read. He has this thing about ribbons and medals and how they really don't. The man won 2 medals of honor, and he says that medals and ribbons don't really mean anything. They're just to get young men to do horrible things. Kind of like Bruce Lee with the belts only, he'll hold up your pants. That same kind of thing about certifications, right? There's a a thing where veterans really feel that success is the next certification away. And so what we really want to do is focus on like tangible skills that you can actually use that people are really demanding. And the only way you're going to prove that you have them is to show that you have them. Like certifications don't mean a ton. That's why we don't have one. But I know that was kind of a long answer to say no. But any other questions?
Yeah. Will there be any, I guess, like, I know we're talking about building a community and stuff and keeping locked in the Discord and stuff. Will there be any potential connections outside once, you know, we've done this? Is there any, you know, upside to that, or building a network through that way on the outside as well? Do you guys have any connections?
I mean, yeah, we've got some of our own personal connections that we connect you with outside of this. One of the other things that we do, you mean like professional connections outside of this course?
Correct. On you know, future learning, continuing on with this, because I know 6 weeks is a cram course, and you can't definitely learn coding in 6 weeks, maximizing it. But yeah, definitely there's something outside of that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Really good question. So we don't have anything specifically structured outside of that, but yeah, it is what you will make of it, right? So if you stay in touch with us and you're looking for some particular connection, we can definitely connect with you. There are folks in our Discord server from earlier cohorts. You can connect with them on maybe projects they're working on and things that they're doing. So in that sense, it exists, but it's going to be kind of what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. If that, I guess, is answering your question. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Right on. All right. So last thing I want to cover is kind of why would anybody listen to me as the instructor? Why am I even doing this? Why would you care what I have to say about it? So I'm a self-taught coder. I took this on a while ago. I was not in computer science in college. I took linguistics. Like I said, I was a Russian linguist, total language nerd. I stumbled into tech as in sales. Actually, I started in sales. Then I moved into some other program management, project management things focused on data science and running teams of data scientists. But while I was working at one startup that I was at, they were doing data science things, and I got kind of enamored with the idea of programming languages and figured out how much like they are like human languages. We'll get into that soon. Not very much, but that was kind of what led me down this. I mentioned already, I'm not exactly a professional developer, but I have made money from coding. There are things that I've done in a few of my previous roles that I could not have done at the scale or accuracy or with the clean repetition that I was able to do by using Python and JavaScript for the most part. Those are the two that I've used in different capacities. And I've also tried a coding bootcamp. I've paid for one when I was first learning because it sounded great. And when I'm convinced they're snake oil, man. I don't think it's something that anyone should ever pay for. So if this course isn't for you, even if it is, there are plenty of other really, really good ones out there that I encourage you to do. There's some that are listed in the resources that I'm going to send out. And if you aren't aware of it, there are a couple of organizations here in the Bay Area for sure that will pay at least partially for veterans to go to coding boot camps. And I encourage you to look into that kind of stuff. If you're curious about that, let me know. And I can tell you which organizations they are. You can look into them and they can, you know, hook it up with something free if it's, or at least subsidized in some way for you if you want to do some other course. But they really do promise something that they don't quite deliver, right? So it's going to be some sort of short course and it's going to be on you to learn it, right? So really to learn coding takes the things that I showed you before, just the internet connection, a little bit of focus and some discipline. You don't need to pay somebody to do it. But the other reason I think anyone should listen to me is that I believe all of you could do it, right? So if you're a military veteran, you've gone through some actual boot camp, you are not a better person, but you understand things like SOPs and general orders, and you are generally speaking, statistically speaking, more apt to be technically proficient. So this sort of thing should be up your alley, regardless of what MOS you were, what service you were in. And again, it's a matter of kind of unlocking whatever head trash you have around why it can't be you that knows how to do it, right? So I believe in you. That's why I think that hopefully you think it's worthwhile listening to me. So with that, I'm going to take the break that I promised. I'm going to send out this resource list. I'm going to give you a chance to sign up for Python Anywhere if you haven't already. And it's just pythonanywhere.com. It's free. Should be simple to sign up. Any questions or anything before we hop to that break?
I do have a quick question. So I know that coding and cybersecurity are not exactly the same, but how do they pair? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when it comes to cybersecurity, that's a whole huge world of things that may not include coding at all, right? If you understand how these systems work at the level that we're going to go through them, be much better positioned to understand how security is done on systems and at what level breaches could happen, where malicious actors might do things, and what sorts of things you're looking at. So I would put cybersecurity in one of those like broader, it's there, but you could probably do just fine in cybersecurity without ever learning how to code. But there are a lot of things that we're going to do with, say, the Linux interface that we're going to do shortly, where a lot of penetration testing and those sorts of things will run through these command line sorts of prompts. So knowing basically how to use that stuff is really, really helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Anything else? Any other general questions before we break? No? All right. Great. So I've got 1826. Let's do a quick 10 minutes. Be back here at 1836. And I'll send out this resource list to everybody and give you all a chance to sign up for Python Anywhere if you haven't. If you get stuck doing that, or you have any questions about it for whatever reason you really don't want to, let me know. You can do these things locally, but it'll be a hang up on deploying it live. But with that, let's take a break. I'm going to keep this on just in case anybody's got questions, but feel free to break.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
So we are only gonna be learning about Python.
Not exactly. It's mostly Python that we're going to be using. We'll do a little bit of JavaScript, and we'll do the most basic of SQL, but it's mostly Python.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. But also it's not a Python course exactly, right? So like we're going to use Python to do something with it, but we're not going to go into the full depth of what Python can do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, gotcha.
Cool. All right, to get started here in just a minute.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Do we need to be on? I know you said that we don't need to have a device particularly, but can a laptop handle this, or do I
Yeah.
need to be on the PC?
No, laptop should be fine. I'm on a laptop.
Okay.
Probably not good on a mobile. screen unless you're just planning on listening, which again I wouldn't recommend. But if you're going to try to do it at all, laptop screen should be fine.
Okay.
At one point when we get to the hands-on part, it's going to be best to split your screens if you've never done that before. For anyone who's not really used to doing these sorts of things and following stuff along, usually I have, whatever I'm watching and learning from on one side of the screen and what I'm writing on the other side of the screen. So getting that way as we do this would be good because we're going to be there at the end of this class. But yeah, you should be fine on a laptop. We're not going to do anything that's really compute heavy or requires a ton of resources. All right. So break time's up. Thanks to those that came back, everybody that stayed. I appreciate it. And let's dive in. So we did our intro. We talked about what it is that the course is going to be. So let's start with some content. So we're gonna kind of hit the ground running. We're gonna go through a quick introduction of what programming is generally, and we're gonna wrap up with setting up our environment and poking around a little bit, playing around with the command line interface, leaving you with a few things to do between now and next time. All right, so the tagline here: computers are stupid. This is something I want you to keep in mind, is that we kind of lose track sometimes and think computers are doing all this smart and amazing stuff. They do one thing really, really, really fast, right? So they count really, really quickly. They calculate really, really quickly. That's about it. They're not thinking. We got to do that part for them, right? So they won't give you any information back unless you tell them to give you the information back. They'll just sit there and blankly stare at you. It's really frustrating. So, just remind yourself the computers are stupid and don't get frustrated with it. It's just a machine. But taking a quick step back, what is programming? Generally speaking, it's the concept of just writing down directions to execute a process. That's really all it is. So we're going to hit this theme over and over again about every program you do, every program you see, every program you work with is just files in a file structure someplace on a computer with directions on what to do. They're very clearly written directions. That's it. So we've mentioned this already a little bit. It's the practice of reading and writing, reading being the emphasis because you spend way more time reading than writing. And then as a profession, you approach it like a trade, right? There's some artistic qualities to it, but when it comes to the work world, it's very much like any of the other trades that exist out there, being an electrician or a plumber or something like that. Those all could be considered trades, but those are very different skills. And you generally focus on one of those and become, you entry level and then become a journeyman and practice and get good at one sort of niche area of all the possible things. Very similar in programming. All right, so what we're going to cover on computing basics is really high-level stuff that you need to keep in mind and be aware of as you're writing software. So some things in hardware, this is top to bottom list, but also think of it as low level to high level. We got operating systems on top of that. We'll mention these things quickly. A lot of this is probably a refresher for most people. File systems and management, user interfaces, meaning graphical user interfaces or GUIs, and command line interfaces, which I've mentioned already. We're going to be doing a lot of our work in. And then we're going to wrap up with languages, talking about human versus machine language and keeping that difference in mind. We'll go a little bit through, again, I did say that we're going to be some math, there's going to be some light math talking about how this conversion is done, just so you've got a concept of it. Not something we're going to need to do a lot of, though. All right, so basically, we don't need to talk a ton about the hardware that's involved, but the things that you do need to keep track of are your central processing unit, CPU. That's where the processing is done. That's where the calculations happen. You have your memory and your storage, right? So these are two different things. We'll talk a little bit more about what they are, but high level, memory is something that does not last from one session to the next. It's temporary. It's information that's stored temporarily while a program is running, whereas storage is persistent. It's something that's saved from one time to the next and is saved for a long time. The reason you want to keep track of these three things is something you're always kind of aware of as you're writing code. Your code will take memory. It will take CPU. You're going to want to save things in storage. You're going to interact with storage. So these are basic parts of hardware that you've got to know about, what they are, sort of how they're being used, how they're referenced by the software that you're using. And then we have inputs and outputs. This is pretty straightforward. So anything that a user can put in information to, like keyboards, mouse, touchscreen, microphone, and then output, screens, speakers, that kind of stuff. You're constantly thinking about your inputs and outputs, both in this physical sense of how users interact with what you're making, but then also from other systems. Inputs and outputs are fundamental when you start designing your systems. Operating systems, quick mention about these. We're not going to dive too deeply into this, but really just keep in mind that it's a set of programs that run other programs. So operating systems themselves are programs. They're files and directories that tell the hardware what to do, that tell other programs what to do, the sequencing of things. It handles a lot of low-level stuff. We're all using operating systems. It's unavoidable, right? So we've got Windows, Mac, Linux. Those are kind of the three big ones that people talk about, use. Generally, Windows and Mac are kind of the two biggest ones. We're going to be using Linux in this course. There's, again, a ton of reasons why we do Linux. It's very, very, very broadly used in all sorts of automated processes, machinery, mass transit systems, literally everywhere. But it's also the way the internet is set up. So when we're looking at our Linux file systems and our file structures that we're doing today, it's going to be the same patterns that we use for the HTTP URLs that we're going to do when we do our web development, because the web is Linux. It's quite literally just pointing to files in this big directory system that's a Linux structure. So the main thing to keep in mind, though, is all programs that we use are running inside some sort of operating system. Again, hopefully that's not news to anybody, but if it is, then we learned something already. All right, quick note about user interfaces. We got graphical user interfaces, or GUIs, which is the point and click, things like on Windows. Again, that's kind of one of their deals. Drag and drop, pushing buttons, all that kind of stuff is graphical user interface. That's typically the kind of thing that developers are building for end users, right? So we are going to be working a lot in what's called a command line interface, which is just text-based. So you got to read and write everything, and you have to do a lot of picturing where these files are relative to where you are, where your working directory is, where you are at this moment. There are ways to look around and check those things out. We're going to go over some of that today, but it's a little bit of a switch. If you're used to poking around and doing things in a graphical user interface, moving over to a command line is a little bit tricky, but it's not that hard. And once you get used to doing file manipulations and folder manipulations using a CLI, it's going to be, you're going to love it. It's going to be great. But that's a lot of what we're going to do in this course is more CLI stuff, but we're going to be building a graphical user interface in our application, right? So our users will be able to push buttons, but we're going to do a lot of things on the command line. Yeah, and then one last note about this that can be done with only a keyboard and screen. So a lot of times Linux interfaces will be like remote server kind of access things. Will be all you need is a keyboard and a screen, and you can do whatever you need to do on a command line interface. All right, programming languages. So this is my favorite part because I'm a huge language nerd and I like talking about languages. And this chart, as kind of bare bones as it is trying to show the difference between human languages at the top and machine languages or binary down at the bottom. And there are a bunch of programming languages or others listed here from top to bottom. The top ones are being more like human language. The bottom ones are closer to machine language. The ones in green are what are called general programming languages for the most part. Some of them do have a slightly specific purpose, but all of the green ones could be considered a programming language, meaning you can do all kinds of different things with them. We're going to be using Python mostly in this course, but we'll do a little bit of JavaScript because the application we're building is a web application, and JavaScript is like the language of the web. It makes websites interesting. It's kind of unavoidable to use JavaScript, and if you want to do web development all the time, you probably aren't going to be doing a lot of Python. You're probably going to do just JavaScript, right? So if you really want to dive deep into web development, all the things that we do here with Python can also be done in JavaScript, and that might be worth time. But Python is way applicable outside of web development. It's really not even best known for that. It does really well with automating processes, with machine learning, data science, all those sorts of things. Python's really big in that. And it's also close to human languages, so it's a very good entry point for beginners. It's a great place to get started. That's the first language you want to learn. There might be reasons to learn some of these other ones like Swift or Kotlin. Those are for iOS and Android mobile development, respectively. And this is also kind of good to keep in mind that these things have a speed differential. So anything at the top is going to be at some point boiled down to machine language at the bottom. It has to be boiled down to this for the machine to understand it. So all the languages that are closer, like C and C# and all these things down here at the bottom, are harder for humans to read, but easier for computers to read. And we're going to be going back around this whole balance of ease of readability for human beings versus the computer through the entire time. So whenever you write code, you have to kind of strike that balance of the people that are going to be reading it and the machine that's going to be reading it, and which one you want to lean towards on readability. These red ones in here are not exactly programming languages. They're what's called specialized languages. We're going to cover a little bit of these too. Mostly the top two here, the SQL or SQL and the HTML and CSS. SQL is a structured query language that's for databases. So we'll get into that when we get into our backend development. It is avoidable. You don't have to do SQL, but we're going to get into why we do it and why we use it. It's very broadly used really useful. Then HTML and CSS, if you haven't seen those before, they're not programming languages, but they are, again, net standards. It's kind of hard to do anything on the internet without touching HTML, which does your layouts, and then CSS, which is going to do like your formatting, colors, fonts, that kind of stuff. All right, so we're going to talk about data in a number of contexts. The first context is today. We'll talk about computer data in its most basic form is binaries, binary information. So it's a set of ones and zeros. So this here is binary. There's a set of ones and zeros. Read it left to right if you wanted to. 1 0 0 0 1 1 1 1 0. And this is broken down into each individual part is called 1 bit of information, and 8 of them arranged together is called a byte. So this is good to know because this is how our computers are storing information, how they process it, how they use it. It's going to become relevant when we start doing our algorithms and deciding which algorithm is best for which purpose. And what we're going to go through here is just a quick kind of how these things are broken down. This, again, is the mathiest math we're going to do. It's not crazy math. It's just to give you an understanding of how binary is converted and what's happening when we type and what's boiling down in that chart that we're just looking at. Right. So each one of these numbers, a 1 or a 0, is a bit of information. Arrange an 8, it's a byte. And we look at our base 10 that we're all used to looking at, the numbers that we're used to dealing with are 0 to 9, really, that we can make all the numbers out of. And we read those similarly left to right. But if you remember back to grade school, each place has a name, right? So there's a ones place, tens place, hundreds place. As we fill up the ones place with, say, 9 digits, as soon as we get the 10th digit, we put a 0 in the ones place and a 1 in the tens place, right? Do the same thing to get to 99. 1 0 0 is 100, right? Binary is exactly the same way, except there's only 2 numbers. So in the first place, where you have 1, as soon as you get 2, you have to move to the second place. And the second place is 2. And so the third place is how you represent 4, right? So it's just a smaller set of numbers, but it's doing the same thing that we're used to doing in base 10. So it's really nothing that magical. This whole kind of middle row down here at the bottom where it says 2 to the power of something, that's the I guess, equation to how to figure it out. So 2 to the 3 is 8. That's the fourth place over. That's 8 in binary, is this place right here. So what does that mean? Why do we want to know that? We can convert this binary, again, this is what computers understand, the top level binary. We can convert that to our base 10 number by just taking this top number and then seeing if we have a 0 or a 1 in that top part. And then if we have a 1, we take the value from this bottom row and add it up, right? So this whole top binary number is 78 in base 10. I know what you're thinking. Whoopty shit, who cares? We got 78. What's the big deal? So what the Army did for us, so we say thanks to the Army, is they came up with this. It's called an ASCII table. And what they did is they encoded all the characters that we can write. They're over here on the right-hand side of this chart. It says char, so it's all the things in blue. Then there's octal. We could skip that. It's another numbering system. And then binary. So the binary equivalent of those things. And I blew up this number 78 that we just found out. And that's a capital N. So the idea here is that every time you type a capital N, it's taking this set of bits arranged, and you'll see that there's only 7 of these because ASCII only needs 7 for the letters. It takes this conversion down to this ones and zeros for the computer to understand the capital N. Right. So I just want that process in your head. We're not going to be converting any of these things. But I also want you to be aware that there are 2 broadly used, and the second one here being more commonly used now. But that ASCII chart that we're looking at, the American Standard Code for Information Exchange, or Interchange, I'm sorry, was sort of the old one. And it encompasses all you could write in English and all the characters that we need for English. But there's more than just English out there. So for emojis and any non-Latin characters, we use Unicode transformation format, or UTF-8. So this is an 8-bit standard. So all of them are 8 bits chunks, whether you take up all 8 bits or not. Right. So this is, again, useful for us to know that this is what's happening. This is what's being done when we write our code. It's boiling down to binary. Any questions about this before we move on? No? Okay. Great. Then we will press on with our command line interface and file system basics. So this is going to be the last slide that we got. And then we're going to slide over, pun very much intended, into Python Anywhere, and we'll start getting a little bit hands-on with some of this stuff. But I want to show this depiction to get in everybody's head. And this is the thing that we're going to be picturing as we're working in our own file systems. This is a standard Linux file system. So it starts here at the top with this slash, or it's called root. And then if you follow down, there's this etc dev home user var. Those all come standard. We're not going to get deep into that. The thing that's important to remember is this home is where we start. And then there will be a username. See this John Omako, Corey. These are all usernames. And under these, you're going to have your own directories. So this is where we're going to do our work. When we are in our own file system, this is where we're going to be. We can traverse this thing. We can do all kinds of different stuff. But I want you to keep this in mind in the back of your head. Shariqua, you got a question?
Yes, I'm sorry, and it's about the previous slide, the ASCII versus the uni situation.
Sure.
So
Sure.
you said that I think it's that one, the American Standard Code,
Mhm.
when that was developed, it was really with our alphabet in mind, right? You
Yep.
just said, okay. And then the new one incorporates, so does it incorporate other actual languages, or is it a uniform computer language that no matter what language you speak, you understand?
So that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. Thanks for asking. So this ASCII table shows all the characters that we can write in English, right? So the UTF-8 will encompass other actual characters, things like Cyrillic or Arabic script, Chinese characters, any of that kind of stuff, as well as emojis like the hand raise, all that kind of thing. Those are going to be in UTF-8. There's no way to really represent those with ASCII.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Cool. Good question. All right. Anything else before we move on?
Can you dummy break this down again a little bit? Just a quick overview, because I'm looking at it and I'm like, all right, so get this in my head. So yeah, please.
Sure. Which part are you struggling with? This file system here, the binary that we're
yes,
talking about?
this process here.
Okay, so this right here is just a visual representation of what we're going to dive into next in Python Anywhere, right? So what we have in any Linux system, so the operating system of Linux, is going to be set up with this structure. So all Linux systems are going to have a root that's going to be denoted with this slash. So the very bottom part of your file structure system. So there's nothing below that, right? And then everything on your computer is going to be inside of that. So you're going to have these other directories, this etc dev home user and var. You're going to have these other directories that exist in every Linux thing. We're not going to do anything in these other ones. They're worth a look at some point, but not for us now. And then we're going to have this home directory that's going to have one or more users in it, right? So you're just going to have your own user instance and you're going to do all your work in this thing. But we're going to be able to move around in this. I'm going to show you how to move around in this in the command line interface. I just wanted to show you this so that you have some sort of image to draw back on when we're trying to picture these things. Because once we go into the command line interface, there won't be as much of a clear graphical representation because it's not a GUI. So does that help hammer home a little bit for you? Okay, cool. Any other questions? And I forgot to mention this earlier, but if you do have a question along the way, do again like what folks have done, take yourself off of mute, raise your hand. If you put something in chat, I'm not going to see it because I have a hard time doing chat and running all this stuff at the same time. So I'd rather you just interrupt me. But any other questions before we hop over to Python Anywhere and start playing around with it? No? All right. Then let's get out of here. And yeah, somebody asked in the chat actually on the break, and I saw that one about the slides. I'll send these out with the information with the stuff for today's recording and whatnot in case you want them, in case you collect slides and like to go back through those. I personally hate slides, but to each his own. All right, Python Anywhere. So hopefully everybody got a chance to sign up, and hopefully everybody did, because these are things that you can do on your own computer. All the stuff that we do, you could do on your own local machine. But again, if you're running on Windows, you're gonna have to translate the commands that we write into Windows commands because they're gonna be written a little bit differently. And you're gonna have to overcome the deploying this to live at some point, whereas it's gonna be live from day one here if you do it directly in Python Anywhere. So for those of you that have, I'm gonna do a quick orientation of Python Anywhere, show you kind of the important stuff, and then we're gonna dive in and start messing around, writing some stuff on the command line, and leave you with some things to play with for next time. All right, so when you first log in, you'll see the screen looks like this. I've blown mine up so it's a little easier to see for folks, so it's probably a little more jammed in together than yours will be. But we default to our dashboard. It'll say, welcome your username. And then we've got some info over here with the CPU usage and file storage. So these are quotas that you're given in your free instance. I have burned up my CPU usage. It's possible. It's not the end of the world. It just makes things slow for you. So just kind of be aware that there is a limit. It's pretty hard to reach, but you can reach it. You have a file storage limit that is not huge. And we're going to need about 25% for the class, roughly. So, feel free to use this how you want to, but keep about 25% open for the class. Other than that, it's going to have recent things that you've done, and we'll kind of skip that for now. You can look at that as you go. But right up here in this sort of middle task, I guess, bar thing where you have dashboard and then next to it consoles, we're going to go into that shortly. That's how you access where we're going to access now our interactive command line interfaces. Files is where we're actually going to have the graphical user interface of the file structure. So all the things that we do, we're manipulating files. You could do that here and actually see where they are if you like. Web is once we get to our web tab, we're going to do that. We're not going to do anything with tasks and databases, but just so you're aware, task is not like a task list. This is for asynchronous tasks. So if you have like an API that your website wants to call, you would run it through a task to make sure your website doesn't crash while it calls the API. We're not going to get into that. That's outside the scope of this course, but it's available. Databases also, we're not going to do anything huge with the databases here. The backend framework that we're going to be using that's built in Python, but it's called Django, has a development database that comes with it. That's like a light version of SQL. That'll be fine for our purposes. But if you want to move on to something a little bit better, there's a free version of MySQL database, very easy to switch over to, and that's available here. But we're not going to touch either of these last two things in the class. All right, so that's quick orientation. We're going to go through these first four all the time. Before we do any of that, I do want to show you, if you would like, this is optional, if you want to add me as your instructor, then you can. You're going to need my name here. So I'm going to actually put that into the chat after I told you not to use chat. I'm going to put my username in the chat, and I'm going to show you where to go to add me as your instructor for those of you that want to. And the reason that you may want to do this is so that I can come in and see your files, your directories, and I can help get you unstuck if you are stuck. Oop, not text, sorry. All right, so I just dropped my username in the Zoom chat for anybody that wants it. But up here at the very top, where you got send feedback, forums, help, blog, account, and log out, we're going to go into account. This is how you're going to set me up as your instructor, again, if you so desire. So once we're at account, again, here, let me zoom out so it looks probably more like what you're going to see. All right, so this is probably what your screen is going to look like when you go there. You're going to have first, it's going to land on this upsell pitch to try to, pay them for a higher level instance. We don't need any of that. Right next to that, where it says upgrade, downgrade account, we got security, email, then education is where we want to click. And then in education, there's a little thing down here where it says enter your teacher's username. Looks like someone's already figured that out. So if you like, you can go ahead and add my username there. And then I will be able to hop in and see. Everybody with me on this? Anybody stuck?
Does it show that I've been added, Jeff?
Let's see.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Go.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Cool. Cool. All right. So, yes, anybody that wants to do that, please feel free to do so. Then again, I can hop in and help you out and look at stuff as we go along. Great. All right. So for the last little bit of course or the class today, what I want to do is actually get familiar, get a little hands-on with our consoles. So we're going to go to this middle, list of things next to dashboard and click on consoles. When we click on that, it's going to take us to this page where it prompts us underneath the Python Anywhere logo to start a new console. We got a ton of options here. So there's Python, a whole bunch of different versions, which we'll get into later in the course on what this means. It's pretty important in Python to choose the right version. We're not going to mess with that right now, though. In these top ones, we're not going to worry about. IPython, again, available here. We're not going to mess with it. We're going to go down here in this other section where it says bash, B-A-S-H. And we're going to click on that bash link. And that should open a bash console for us. Should look something like this when it does. I'm going to zoom in on this so it's a little bigger. It might be too big, but we'll see. All right, so once you open a bash console, it should say up here again, bash console, and then a long string of numbers because they just create like a serial number for it. And then it'll give you this time, which I'm assuming is UTC. I've never actually bothered to look. And this little tilde, which is short for our full path to our home directory. So that's the first kind of thing about Linux. You got to remember this tilde is useful. We can use it to write and reference our home directory, or we can use it to show that this is the home directory without writing the whole thing out. And then this little $sign that shows us that we have control of the console. And we have our cursors here as this red block for me. And it kind of blinks slowly. All right, so the first command that I want to go through and show you kind of how to look around and tell where you are, right? So right now, I've told you we're at the home directory because that's what that tilde means. But if you don't want to take my word for it, and you shouldn't, there's good quotation of trust but verify, right? So we want to verify that this is the case. We're going to type in a command. Now, commands in Linux are almost always lowercase. They're usually one set of characters, so it's not spaces between words. Even if it is comprised of several words, it's usually one set of characters in one string, all lowercase. And a lot of times it'll be an abbreviation or an acronym. It's not often the full word spelled out. But so this one we're going to do is print working directory, which is just the letters PWD, right? And when we hit that, it'll break out where we are now and show us the full directory. So as you can see, there's a slash. And if you think back to the diagram that I showed you, where the top slash, the root, this is that top Linux root. There's home, so this is the home directory. And then there's my username. And that's where I am now. So this is telling me when I do print working directory where I am. Now, another thing that's useful is when you're looking to say your graphical user interface on Windows or whatever the case may be, and you open up a directory, you open up a folder, you look inside that folder, you can see all the files that are listed in there. So one of the ways we do that here is with a command called ls, which is short for list. And it's going to list everything that we have in there. You should just have a readme text, readme.txt in there that's available for you to read. It's got information that's valuable on there. This list command is really useful, shows a lot of what's around. And I like to add what's called flags to it. So I'm going to show you the first kind of use of Linux command flags. What we do is we'll put in our base command, in this case, ls. So we're going to list things, but then we want to add some other information. So let's say we want to see hidden documents and hidden files and folders and those sorts of things. So we're going to do a space after ls, dash, then the letter A. So the A is a flag. It's referencing all. So it means everything. So it's going to show me a whole bunch of hidden. So things that start with a dot are hidden. If you're doing this yourself, you're probably not going to have as much as I do. I've got some things that I've hidden or stashed or have, they exist for whatever reason. You're going to have a different amount of things because you just started. Don't worry about it. But this is one use of flags. Another very, very useful thing. And if you're trying to take notes, I forgot to mention this before. If you're like taking notes somewhere else and you're not quite following along in this, I recommend you do it here because if you write these commands along, it will save it in what's called history. So you type in the word history. When you hit enter, it's going to show you all the commands that you did. So here's just the last few commands I did, the PWD, ls, lsa, and then history itself. So that's useful. So this is kind of like taking notes while you're functionally doing it. So about flags, real quick. A very, very useful flag for any of these commands, any command that you're trying to do, or as you're exploring and you're learning your own Linux commands and doing things along the way, is the help flag. So if we do ls, and then 2 dashes and the full word help, not just a letter, it should give us probably more than we need, but it'll give us a whole bunch of information. It has a list of flags that are available here. Let me zoom out so this can actually fit on the screen a little bit.
And Jeff, was it ls space dash dash?
Yes.
Okay.
ls and then space dash dash.
Okay.
And I'm going to scroll up to the top of this a little bit to show where
how do you delete?
Yeah. I'll show you how to clear this off. It's pretty simple. But I want to scroll up here and show you that once you do help, this is technically the abridged version of the help too. So this is sort of the shorter one, but it's got all the flags in here written out. And as you can see, a lot of them, like all that we did, if it's 2 flags, you write the full word, or 2 dashes, you write the full word, 1 dash, you write just the short letter. And the reason I do sometimes is dash H for help, sometimes not. So dash dash help is just more reliable. But the very first thing it's going to show you, so here's my command up here where I said dash, so ls space dash dash help, all lowercase. And then right underneath that, we have this line that says usage. And this is going to give you the basic syntax of that command, right? So it'll have the command you're looking for, and then it'll say option or file or, like whatever follows that. And there will be a space between each one. And this is like the manual page for that thing. And this is all built into Linux. So you could do this with any command that's out there. You do this with the print working directory, history, makes no difference. Help is a really good thing to know. Yeah, for those of you that want to erase this stuff, which I like to do because this gets really jumbled really fast, one of my favorite commands that I use all the time is just the word clear, C-L-E-A-R, all lowercase, and it'll just move all that stuff out of your way. And so it's taken off. You have a clear screen to write on. I like to do that every couple of lines just to keep things neat. But again, that's also something that is kind of a matter of preference, right? Another really useful manual thing to look up, like a way to access a manual is, sorry, let's clear this up again, is just the word man, short for manual. So do MAN and then the command you want to do. So if we want to do like the manual for LS and see the whole thing, this is going to be a much more in-depth, full-on documentation. And this is, again, good for any command in Linux. So you just type in MAN, then the name of the command. But one caveat on this, as you can see, at the bottom it says manual page, LS1, line 1, press H for help or Q to quit. So what that means is that I don't really have control of my command line interface right now. I'm using the up and down buttons to scroll because I can't scroll with my mouse to scroll right now. And I'm kind of stuck in this manual until I hit Q to quit. So to get out of there, I hit Q, but that also, unlike help, didn't jumble up my entire console. So those are two ways that you can get information about commands. You can either type the command space dash dash help or type in man, MAN, short for manual, and then the name of the command, and it'll give you all the options, everything that you can imagine, all the flags that go for it. So those are two really useful things.
And Jeff, when you hit clear, it looks like, well, when I hit clear, it looks like it gave me a fresh page, but everything else was still somewhere at the top.
Yep.
So does it stay, like all of the things you do stay in the memory, or I don't know if it's called the memory?
Yeah, they do. I mean, it's called history, but it does stay there. So there's a number of ways to get to it, right? So what it's really doing here is it's just kind of like scrolling everything up so it's out of your face, but it's still there. So you could press an up arrow and recall your last command. So I'm just pressing the up arrow now, and it's just cycling back through my commands as I want to, and then down arrow. And then I can just hit enter on any one of these, and it'll call that command again. Okay. So that's an option as well. So they are still there, and it is actually written out to a file that you can dig up that's called your bash history file that you could, and it's just writing it down there. You can just grab and look at it at some point. Cool. Aurelius, you got a question?
Yeah, so the man ls and the ls dash dash help, is that the same list?
Yeah, so those are both the same command. They're just they're different versions of the documentation. So
Gotcha.
the dash dash help is going to be like the quicker kind of abridged version if you're just trying to remember the syntax real fast and maybe like the most important flags. That's usually the one you go to. And the man is like the full-on documentation with everything. Cool. Any other questions? All right. So there's a list of useful commands that I put into the resources that I encourage you to look at and look up some ones online. We're going to go through a couple more here just because I want you to be fairly familiar with a few things that we're going to do in the course over and over again, and some of the coolest stuff about Linux that's just available to us. But this isn't a full-on Linux course, right? So you can do programming directly here and doing Linux administration. That's a full career. If you wanted to dive deep into this could be a whole thing, right? There are really great stuff like sed is a super cool command. If you've got time, looking that up is amazing. And awk is also a great one. If you want to look either of those up and look into it, we're not going to get that deep into it. We are going to do some basic file manipulation and folder manipulation. So making directories and files and things like that. So the commands that we're going to use for that, the first one is short for make directory. So it's mkdir. And then we just give it a name of a directory. So any directory name we want to, pretty much anything is legal. The there probably are some restrictions, but if you just stick to regular words, you should be fine. So I'm going to do something really unexciting and call it example and just make myself an example directory right here where I am. If I don't give it any other direction as to where to go, it defaults to the directory that I'm in right now. So if I want to put it someplace else in my file system, I can, but it's good for right here. So when I hit enter on this, it will have done it, but it doesn't give me any sort of, hey, are you sure you want to make that? Or is this really what the name you want to be? None of that. It just happens, right? So to make sure that did happen, we're going to do ls again. And now I can see that directory is listed as example. And there it is. So that's how you make a directory. Now, if we want to make a file in a directory, there are a whole ton of ways to do it. You can use a command called echo and just echo things out into a directory. We're not going to do any of that sort of thing. We're going to do two ways of doing it. There's one command called touch, just the word touch, and then you give it a file name, right? And this is going to, technically what it does is it just changes the timestamp on a file. That's really what touch is supposed to do. So if you look at the manual, that's what it's going to say. It's not going to say this is used for creating files. Somewhat of a hack way to create a file. It does default to making a file if there isn't one, though. So we use it to make files that are empty. So anytime you want to make a file, but you don't want to put anything in it, this is a quick way to do it. So we're going to give it the full path. And I'm going to give it the path into that example folder that I made to show that we can make files in other locations, not just in the one that we're in. And actually, real quick, before I move on, I want to show something that I'm sure you didn't see because I did it quickly, but something that's also really cool about Linux called tab completion, right? So as you're typing any of these things, these commands, or any of the files or directories that you're trying to find, usually you just have to type in the first couple of letters and then hit tab. And if that exists where you are, if the command exists, or if the directory or file exists, it'll fill in for you what you're trying to say, right? If you have several things, like I say, I had example 2, example 3, example 4 directories in here. When I hit tab the first time, it would give me a little warning sound. And when I hit it the second time, it would list all the available options that match it, right? So tab complete, very, very useful trick. Definitely use it. I'm going to use it all the time. It also helps us make sure we avoid misspellings and stuff like that, right? So it's really, really useful. So I'm going to make this file just as an example. We're going to do test.txt. Got to write all the way out because it doesn't exist yet. And when I hit enter on this, again, it will not give me any confirmation of any kind. Just kind of sits there and looks at me. So if I want to see that it's in there, I can do my list command, but I can pass it a directory, right? So if I want to see what's in the example file, so I'm going to do ex, and then I'm going to hit tab. It does exist. Now this is going to list the context of the example file. See, there's no README file because that's where I am now. It's at my home folder. This is in the example file, in the example directory.
I have 2 questions.
Okay. I hopefully have 2 answers.
The first question is there like a hard copy of all of these commands somewhere?
Yeah. So yeah. In the resources list, there's kind of like an internet list that's got like a ton of commands on there.
Okay.
It's not going to have specifically these that we did, but again, keep in mind the things that we've done and try to figure out a way to do it, right? Like looking at the list, look at where you are, print working directory, those kind of things.
And the second question, because I'm a visual, like I'm not a completely visual learner, but I need that visual element.
Okay.
So when this is happening, right, and you do this, you said you created a file.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does it show up somewhere? Like, is it?
Yeah. So there's another way to visualize it. We weren't going to get to this till later.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's fine. I just wanted.
I was going to say, I could try to do it now. I just don't want to jumble everything up. So there are other ways to visualize this. This list thing is useful for visualizing it, but again, you do have to kind of maintain some memory of where things are.
Mm-hmm.
And where you are in relation to those things. You got to kind of picture it in your head a little bit. There's another command that's really cool. It's called tree. And it'll do a more visual breakdown of the directories and everything. And let's see what I get when I run that. That's not too bad. There you go. So this is a little bit more, this tree command is really cool. And we are going to be using it later once we have our project more built out and we have several directories and a whole bunch of files within those directories and there's subdirectories, and the ls command is just really not going to cut it, right? It's going to be too hard to keep everything pictured. So what this is showing us is this dot is real standard notation for like the top directory, the directory you're in, right? So dot is like where you are now, and then this is all the stuff that's in it. So on this level is all the stuff that's directly in that directory, and then as you can see, this thing is what's in this example directory, right? So it goes all the way down to what's in test. So this is a somewhat more visual way of doing it. It's not necessarily a standard thing in Linux. You may have to like download this if you're running this off your own device, but it's a real simple thing to add and it's real common to use. Is that a little better visually?
But does this at some point translate over into like a picture or emoji or a cartoon or like a little file picture or something?
No. See, that's the kind of tough part about doing this in a command line interface versus doing it in the GUI. So what we can do, if like this is just way too difficult for you to really picture and use it this way, all the things that we're doing in here, you can do in files. And there is this full-on graphical representation, right? So here's my home username, and then there's all the hidden stuff is shown by default, but here's my example directory, and I can click down into it, and there's my test.txt. And I can open that up and actually write in here. And we're going to be doing some of this too and use these built-in things. We don't have to do everything directly in command line. But
And see, I took
really an expedient way
a
to do it.
computer programming class when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And it was literally us writing on paper the ones and the O's.
Brutal.
And
Yeah.
so that's how I could like this. I mean, I'm gonna I'm gonna go through this and hopefully but yeah.
Yeah, it's going to take some practice. It's going to take some practice for sure. And it is definitely, it is a little bit to get used to, getting used to the CLI versus the GUI. Aurelius, what's the question?
Yeah, is there a way if you made a mistake and put something into the file that you can delete it and erase it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of ways we can open and edit the file here directly, which is the next thing I want to show you, or we just delete the file and get rid of it entirely and just throw it out and start from scratch.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'm gonna show you is the way to edit files, right? And this is another way to create files. So if you do this without any file of any kind, it'll make a new file, but you can also open files and edit them. So built into pretty much every command line, there is a text editor called Vim, and we get to it by writing V, right? So we can write V just by itself, and it'll go into this text editor and do that, and that's cool. But we can also edit the file that we have, right? So if we want to just make changes to a file that exists, we can do our test.txt and open that up, right? So we write V, the name of the file we want to go to. And again, we use this to make files. So if we didn't have test.txt or, we want to make another file, we could just do the same syntax, write V, and then the full path to the file that we want to use, and it'll create that file if it doesn't exist. All right, so I'm gonna give you a warning. If you're following along, which I encourage you to do, this is once again, like the man page, is going to take us to a different place in control. So you may get stuck here. It's very common that people get stuck, and it's exceptionally frustrating when you do. Please do though. Get stuck. It's part of the game.
How do you get out of get stuck?
Yeah. So here we go. When we get into V, now we're in V. So this is where it's kind of confusing. This is our blank document. This is what it's going to look like. And we can't just start typing away. We have to tell it that we want to insert something into this file, right? So what we want to do is hit the I letter. You see down at the bottom, it says insert right down here at the bottom. So that means I could type now. So I can type whatever I want. And there it is. All right. So now I got on my text file and I'm still in insert mode. So whatever changes I want to make, if I want to clear things out, I want to add things, copy and paste, whatever you want to do. When you're done, you're going to hit escape to get out of insert mode. And then you're going to write colon, so the 2 dots. Then W stands for write, lowercase w. So that's the way you save any of the changes you've made. And then Q for quit. So colon WQ is how you get out of V if you want to save your changes. If you don't want to save your changes, do colon quit, right? So that's something I want everybody to practice doing a little bit, because that's a very fast way to open things up and make changes. It's really, really handy. You just do V, the name of the thing you want to do. So we could do even another one. Let's do a file we don't have, right? So let's first look. I'm going to show you in my example directory, I only have my test.txt file. So I'm going to do this time a test2.txt, but I'm going to use V instead of touch. And this is going to create that file for me, and it's going to create a blank text file. All right, so now I'm in this blank text file. Hit I to insert. Another text file. And I'm going to hit escape when I'm done making changes. Colon WQ, right quit to get out of it. And now you can see if I do ls, well, that's where I am now. If I want to do ls an example. So now we have test our test document and our test2 document as well, right? So V is another option for both making and editing. It's a built-in editor, really, really handy. If you're in there and you get stuck and you forget how to exit, hitting escape, :Q or :WQ if you want to save your changes. Another thing you can always do is if you come back to your console, look at the Zoom stuff in the way. At absolute worst, if you go back to your Python anywhere and you're totally stuck and you're jammed up in V and you can't figure out how to get out, you can just come here and hit this little X and it'll throw away your console and you can start over. And that's not going to hurt you. It's not going to cost anything. And it should save portions of your history as well if you're relying on that. But don't be afraid to do that.
I'm trapped. I did the colon in the Q.
What's that?
I did the colon in Q and I'm trapped.
Oh yeah.
I'm
Did you make a
trapped
change and then do :Q?
I started typing something.
Yeah, if you try to do : then Q before, it's like, so you have to write WQ because write is save, W for write, and that's how you save things. So if you make changes, if you try to exit without making changes, it'll give you this warning that says like, hey, you changed stuff. And so you could give it either an exclamation point to override that and quit without saving, or the WQ.
You say exclamation point?
Yeah, so you do :Q exclamation point, I think should do it.
Yay. Because when I did V, I just did V. I didn't put
Oh yeah, and that'll work too. I mean, that'll just take you into V. Yeah, so I recommend everyone practice that. It's really, really handy to go quickly in and out of V. Sometimes it's nice to just be able to pop stuff out into a file instead of going through and opening it through the GUI and open it up in the file editor. Another cool handy one, like a way to look at files to see what's in there, is cat, which is short for concatenate. Let me clear this up real quick. So cat, and then you just give it a file name, right? So let's see what's in our. Oh, here's tab complete when I have two things that start out the same. So I hit tab twice and it shows me what's available. All right, so tab complete my test2, and cat will just concatenate each line out of your text file. So it just throws out on the screen what you had and then gives you back control. So it doesn't take you into editor. It's just a way to read what's in a file real quick if you just want to have a look in there real fast without making any changes. So V, definitely worth a look. I think you should all try it out. Try getting stuck. Try getting yourself unstuck if you can. If you can't, ping me and we can figure it out. But
I got unstuck, but now I'm like in the V file. Now I'm like, all right, what's the next steps to type in it now? I forgot.
Oh yeah, letter I, insert. Yeah, to insert. Then you can start typing. Cool. So then the last thing that I wanted to kind of leave you with is, I'm not going to go through as the examples. I'm just going to show you the commands that I want you to kind of learn and play around with yourself. We made an example directory using mkdir, which we're going to use a lot. We're going to make directories and things like that. But then you're also going to want to remove directories and throw things out, right? So there are two commands for that. The first one is rmdir, which is just remove directory. And try that one out, removing directories, making directories. You're going to run into some problems with this at first because this will not remove directories that have anything in them. It's kind of like a fail safe. You can only remove empty directories, right? If you want to remove files themselves, you just use the command rm, and that will just delete a file by itself, right? So rmdir is for directories that are empty. Rm is for files. You can also use this with flags. This flag, it's called recursive. It's the dash. So rm dash r, rm space dash r. This is how you remove directories that have things in them, right? So we're going to talk about recursion next week when we talk about algorithms, because recursion is just a really cool concept if you haven't heard of it before. But basically what this does is it's going to go through a directory and just delete everything all the way to the very bottom of that directory and then to the top and completely throw everything out. So if you want to throw in empty directory, rmdir is good. It's good to use that failsafe sometimes. Like again, if I try to use rmdir, for example, stuff in there says, hey, it won't work. If I really want to remove that, then I'm going to use rm with the recursive flag.
And to remove a file, you just do rm, you don't put the file name?
You do file name, yes. rm, then file name. So rm file, if I want to do like, just say my test2 one, I could do that. And then we'll see that it's not in there anymore. We just have that one. And then if I want to remove the entire directory, then I want to use the recursive flag, and it'll take care of this entire directory and throw it out. Just now you can see it's totally gone.
rem-dir, is that like a fail safe if you have something in there and it'll say it failed to remove?
Yeah, that's kind of the idea, is that they made it to where you can't accidentally, because as you can see, there's no, when I did this RM with the R flag, it just did it. There's no like, hey, you sure you want to throw this out, or we moved it to the trash bin, it'll be there for 30 days. Like, that's gone. So you got to be really sure you know what you're doing and
So
be
there's no way
positive. about it.
to pull it back. It's not cached or anything. It's just gone.
No, I mean, not at the level that I know how to do it. So not easily. Maybe there's probably some like deep forensic way of grabbing those things, but not in a simple recall way. This is like, consider it deleted forever once you delete it. So that's also good to know. Anything that you delete is going to be pretty much gone. So you got to be really sure you want to delete it. All right. So those are the major things I wanted to get through today. And I want to leave you all with this setup so that we can start playing around with it next time. And we're going to start creating, running files, running Python commands out of this. So all the stuff that we did today, all these Linux interactions, those are just kind of like administrative things so that we can function through this quickly. And we know how to use this at a really basic level. This is not going to be a Linux course. We're not going to dive any deeper into any of these things. But again, I do recommend it if these are things that like you already know how to do this stuff with Linux, take the time and go learn something else. Again, sed or awk, those are really good commands that if you're a little bit higher level than what we did today, it's worth a look for you. Otherwise, for everybody else, if this is your very first time doing it, play with these things, get used to it, get comfortable making directories, deleting directories, opening files, get used to doing that stuff so because we're going to be doing more of that as we go. Any questions before we break for the day?
Will you be able to send the new Discord link? The one that was sent, it says it's no longer active. I think it's what it said.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yes, I will. Thank you for flagging that. Do that right after this. And I will also send the recording from this session if you want to rewatch it. I'm going to put it up on Zoom. So it takes a little while to process that, but I'll send that out and I'll make sure that I put the new Discord link in there as well. Thanks for flagging that.
Yeah.
And also, could you give us the slightest idea on like which web app that we're going to be actually making? Like what kind of a web app we're actually designing?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to do is it's going to be a to-do list. So it's going to be really, really basic to-do list. And the reason we do that is pretty much anything that you can think of that exists out there in the world as an application is a to-do list, right? So it covers kind of the 4 operations that all applications are: creating, reading, updating, and deleting. So we're going to create a task. We're going to be able to update that task. We'll be able to read the task once we've updated it, see it on a list of tasks, and then we'll be able to delete those once we're done with them. And it's going to be like a 2-page web app because we're going to have a home page and then the actual app page, but it could easily be 1 page if you wanted to. That's kind of a design decision. We're more going to show that for demonstrative purposes to show how to route several pages through our backend framework. That answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Anything else? Any other questions, general or specific? No? All right, great. Well, with that, then we're at time. I really thank you for your attention, your participation up to now. I hope you come back Thursday. I'll follow up with the recording from tonight's class, the slide deck, and the new Discord link to make sure everyone can join that wants to. And if you have any other questions or anything that comes up between now and next class, don't hesitate to reach out.
The Discord link, is it like, could you just drop it in the chat? Because I have mine open. I just want to like just join it if you could.
You know what, man? I can't.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Long story. I don't have Discord on this Windows instance that I'm using. Zoom,
oh, okay,
so,
okay.
Sorry.
So we're gonna get those information in the email. Is that?
Yeah,
what it is?
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I
appreciate it.
a lot of you.
Well,
Yep.
thank you.
For sure. All right, y'all.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you. Have a good
All right.
night, everyone. Take
Thanks.
care.
All right,
Good night,
bye.
everybody.
Have a good night.